Guruve Gaura Chanjaya Radhikaya Tadale Krishnaya Krishna Bhaktaya Tada Bhaktaya Namo Namaha Vancha Kalpatrubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhaivacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Dhanavad Pranam devotees. So, famous last words. I want to make a short video regarding a topic and a couple of threads that have come up on media regarding the view of science and bhakti, or the review of science and religion in general. So it's expanded its original framework to spread out and become a larger thing. But what I wanted to do here, in the interest of time, and in the fact that I've not made a formal preparation as though I was going to give a lecture in the university or something, but I'm just speaking from just extemporaneously is the word, right? About the subject. So the idea is, which is in the title itself, is the creation science that's mentioned in Scripture, whether it's mentioned as an ontological narrative, or in the case of Vedic scriptures as an actual history, are they any less plausible than the Darwin theory of evolution? So, of course, from academic perspective, we all maybe came through school at a time when, I would say that's the majority of people at this point, when the theory of evolution was the standard curriculum, right? And at that time, maybe there was no need to question it or be concerned about it, be concerned about the nuances of it or anything else. You just needed to pass that class, right, and move on, right? So the thing is, though, there are pretty far-reaching implications around the theory of evolution and the whole makeup of the academic framework which supports it. One is that, in our society, we value education. And education is something that is recognized. In other words, there are established institutions. I'm not in this particular format going back to the history of universities and so forth, because that's a pretty deep study as well. How they were formed and some of the pretense under which they were formed. Right, and I'm not talking about the ancient schools, which we could consider original universities, but the contemporary model of universities. But in regard to our subject matter, how it is supported by universities, and those who attend universities become credentialed by universities, especially very esteemed universities. They hold the, quote, mantle on establishing what is considered to be truth, for lack of a better word. This is the truth about the origin of life, creation, everything else. So, of course, when you question the theory itself, then there are many, even according to the structure of science, many loopholes, right? For instance, most evolutionists will readily admit, even those who are physicists and are now trying to study the origin of life, they've not made a conclusion on that. So, obviously, just by logic, if you have not made a determination on the origin of existence itself, I would think that's a huge variable in any calculation you have going forward. Because whatever it is that is the true genesis, original causation of everything, would have a huge impact on the calculus that you've done to the point of your conclusion to date. You cannot say, for instance, 3 plus 1 is 4 plus 1 is 5, And then if you had that written out, and I took a piece of paper and I covered the original part of that calculation so that you didn't know what it was, well, that's certainly a big deal, because whatever that original base of the calculation was will determine whether the answer is truly 5 or not. You understand? We could assume that if we're working in a metric of units of 1, that is true. But if that calculation that's unknown to you is different, it could change the whole outcome. So there's no way to become conclusive about a theory without having a perspective on that variable. How could it be? If you don't have a sound conclusion on the genesis of everything and what that is or who that is, then all the calculation you've done to date is pretty much conjecture, because a huge variable is missing, and that variable could have an impact and effect on the way you've calculated and the conclusion you've come to from your calculation. So that's just common sense. Now, that is a fact that you'll find readily admitted by all evolutionists, that they don't know what is the original origin. And even when it comes to describing the nature of life beyond what is empirically understood, as far as the physical makeup of the of the living beings, right? They don't yet have a handle on consciousness. They call this the hard problem. They don't really yet have a handle on consciousness. Some people may recognize, well, there's something there, but I'm not sure what it is, etc., etc. So with all of those absent variables, how can you have a proper conclusion on everything? So that's one step in the logic of comparative to the, and I'm going to take the Vedic model because it's what I'm most familiar with. I do recognize, whether it is biblical, Quranic, or in any old Jewish writings in the Talmud, anything, there's certainly an ontological narrative that's given to try to explain creation, right? I'm going to take the Vedic model only because of familiarity. So, whereas I just pointed out at least loopholes of the absence of a variable in the evolution theory, let's take a look at the Vedic model. Just take a look at it. This is obviously cursory because there's so many more nuances, details to both sides of this. But just taking a cursory look at the Vedic model, it says that there is an absolute supreme being. So, an absolute supreme being is described. So I'm going to quote a verse and then give the definition because it's helpful. Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchidananda Vigraha Anadi Adir Govinda Savakarana Karanam. So I'm not going to get into necessarily just the religious aspects of that, just the operable aspects for our discussion. So one is that it's describing there is a Ishvara, it means a controller, right? Taking the Sanskrit language and putting it in English. There is a controller, Parama, who is superior in their position. So if you just took the religious references off of it, you took the spiritual references off of it, just by the meaning of the words, there is a person who is in a posture of superiority to everything. Ishvara Parama. And then Krishna, name is given. But for now, let's take any nomenclature out of it also. So Ishvara Parama, just on the external basis, there is a superior posture. Then it says, Sat Chit Ananda Vigraha. The composition of that superior posture and person is in a position of eternal existence. So therefore, it indicates that variable, posture, person, post, is beyond temporal existence. So you would have to do any kind of research to understand that phenomenon in a understanding of eternality. And there's nothing in the material metric which is not temporal. So it would mean you'd have to come to some understanding which would put you in a position to understand eternality. Is that available to the souls in this world, or to the persons in this world? Let me not jump ahead. To persons in this world? Certainly. Because most of the evolutionists are also acknowledging consciousness, and by not acknowledging or either couching consciousness as something which is undefinable, necessarily, you can't codify it necessarily, it doesn't also give rise then to what is the seat of that consciousness. And we know consciousness operates in a way that does things that matter can't do. Aspiration, emotion, etc. Those things are not facilities of matter. You understand? Therefore, consciousness, because it operates in that modality, and the only verifiable, observable experience of emotion, aspiration, etc., is in persona. You don't experience it without persona. So it's observable. It's not something that's mysterious, right? Unless you're saying all the people walking around with hopes and dreams and love and feelings, they're all impersonal, right? So you've observed that those things are not generated from matter, because we don't get that same thing from rocks or trees, etc., necessarily in a observable way. You understand? But even in animals, we get some observation of it, where persona is more pronounced and consciousness is more active or more blossomed, so to speak. So we do acknowledge those things exist because we observe them. But they're not even aware that consciousness is seated in persona somehow or another, which we're given the nomenclature of the soul. But they're not recognizing that. So again, that's a huge variable missing out of any calculations they've done regarding life, the origins of life, etc., etc. Well, I won't say origins of life because they don't claim that. But here we're saying that person is existing, sat, they are cognizant, chit, and ananda. Ananda is an emotional content because it refers to happiness or bliss, but that's an emotional content. So it indicates there is a supreme posture being which is situated on the platform of eternality beyond temporal experience, that is fully cognizant and has an emotional content. And if we just want to take the simple cause and effect idea, then obviously it would be more logical that what we see observable to us in the human experience, where you find emotion, happiness, and distress and other emotional content, it would be a more logical explanation that that is a source. Right? This is being claimed by the scripture, but the argument is more logical. Then everything came from nothing. Right? The argument itself is more logical. And even as human beings, we have the evolution of consciousness, so to speak, that we can recognize. Well, yeah, that seems to make more sense than this. You understand? That perception that we have is a feature of cognition. And the emotional results of that epiphany is, oh yeah, that feeling is all symptomatic of the things which are inherent in what is being described as the origin of creation in the scripture. Converse to that is an explanation that, well, everything came from nothing. Because that's the base plate so far. Everything came from nothing, and then miraculously started to evolve into something which developed into what we are now. So just in our human framework, right, and even in using scientific things, in terms of replication of the experience, observation of the experience, we see that those things are consistent with an idea of a superior being from which the nature of all these things generated. So it's just certainly more logical, right? Now, let's take a look at why it would not be accepted then by scientists, right? And I'm not saying all scientists, so we're not making a team dynamic, all science on one side, all religion and spirituality on one side. We're not doing that. We're saying for those who've taken the posture, like there's this guy, Richard Dawkins, and I'm mentioning by name because he's availed himself publicly to the complete denouncing of the idea of God and being atheist and so forth and so on. So there are many scientists who may feel that way but don't proclaim it. There may be some who do. There may be others who they're just ignore. I don't know, right? I'm following science right now, but I don't know, right? So you have all variations. So there's not a absolute classification of the scientist versus the religionist. It's not like that. All right, so now here you have somebody who's avowing absolutely that this is not true. So let's look at some of the ways that that's done. When you bring up any scripture, it's immediately put into a category of mythology. Nobody ever asked the question, why? Well, of course, a myth means there's different definition of the word myth. It could mean a story that's told regarding a certain history according to certain religions and so forth, so on. But another part of the definition is that it is something that's not true, but is accepted or believed by certain people, right? So because of the second definition, the idea of immediately categorizing it as mythology immediately establishes it as not true. But here's the point. Who has been able to confirm that it's mythology? In other words, it's just a consensus of people who have a different view, who come together, and here's where this whole idea of academia and the university system, higher education system in general, becomes problematic in some ways, because they set the table for what will be acceptable as truth, and therefore they feel they have a mandate to put things in a category, and everybody has to abide by that. Obviously, religionists don't. People who have particular bases of faith in different traditions, right, they don't. But in the social fabric, right, like if you go to school, right, well, if you go to school, when going to school, right, you're obliged to accept the curriculum inclusive of those kind of conclusions. So, in other words, a mandate has been set that will be called mythology. You understand? But there's no evidence or no rationale about why it's mythology, except we already have come to a conclusion, and that would disturb the conclusion we came to. Therefore, we have to find a category for it because it's existing, so we'll call it mythology. So in academic circles, research into ancient cultures, their beliefs, their traditions, their science, spiritual science, all of that is now mythology. You understand? So it's just academic convenience to put it in a category where you don't have to deal with it, while simultaneously acknowledging you yourself don't know what these things are proclaiming. So here in the Vedic cosmology, they're claiming there is an original existence in the persona of a divine supreme being who has the qualities I just mentioned, Satchidananda. But then the question will come, if we're using chain of causation logic, what was the origin of that supreme being? Well, it's defined right there. Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchidananda Vigraha Adir Govinda Sava Karana Karanam. It is a persona which has no cause. You understand? It itself has no cause. By definition, that's what God is. In other words, if we're just looking at nomenclature, and you're following the logic of chain of causation, when you come to whatever the original cause is, you can call it original, nothingness, whatever you want to call it. We're identifying it as God under the various nomenclature of God, whether it's Krishna, Allah, Jehovah, Buddha, whatever, right? I'm not getting into those dynamics right now. But the point being, we're identifying the original causation, right? That's part of the definition of God is original causation. You understand? No matter how far back you want to go, when you get ready to stop saying beyond that, beyond that, beyond that, then when you run into the term or nomenclature, God. Now, Sava Karana Karanam. That original causation is the cause of every other cause. So then if you look at causation as your logic, here it's being said in Scripture, yes, here is the origin of all other causes and their effects. Now, because we mentioned that original cause has even observable features that we see in our contemporary experience, why should I accept that somehow or another we were fish who became land animals and cats became dogs over some macro evolutionary period? And that's why. Why am I obliged to accept that over the logic that there is a supreme being inclusive of persona, which more clearly explains an origin of that element, emotion and persona, and consciousness, right? It also explains the nature of the perception of our eternality. Because if death was a very natural phenomenon and the death rate is 100%, there would be no inner rebellion against that idea. We wouldn't be fighting hand and tooth for medicines and technology and science to try to prolong life. If it's temporal, it's temporal. But there's something in us that recognizes that there's an incompatibility with what's intrinsic versus what the experience is externally. So that inner reality that I am eternal is making itself known because it's indispensable from consciousness. And therefore the idea of temporal experiences that go on in cycles, which we identify as samsara, is not compatible with our original nature. You understand? And therefore nobody lines up to die. You understand? Don't give me, circumstantial arrangements, or people decide to go to war and they could die there, or people commit suicide. Because I will tell you that the psychology of happiness exceeds even the existence of the idea of existence. In other words, people exist on the basis of the need for happiness. That's why everybody's in pursuit of happiness. People are not in pursuit of distress. But in the duality of the reality of the soul in combination with the material temporal existence, it is not it's like oil and water. Therefore, you can never find exclusive happiness. There's always going to be some misery. At least the facing of the temporal nature of this existence. You get everything you want, right job, right career, right wife, right husband, right place, right everything, and it's all temporal. So the facing of that creates an emotion in us that's not accommodating. Because there's something in us that says, no, this is not natural to who I really am. But, again, the evolutionary theory doesn't account for it. It doesn't account for it. So it doesn't account for consciousness, which is the actual seat of emotional content, and the seat of that consciousness is the soul itself. But they can't even get to the point of consciousness. And the sciences of psychology are dabbling around with the physical body and trying to find experiences related to functions in the brain. What you're doing is you may be observing physical activity in the brain, but that's not telling you the source of it, where emotional content comes from. Certainly emotional content is not coming from the brain itself, the physical brain. Emotional content can be observed as things happening in the brain, but you cannot say emotional content is coming from the brain, the material brain mass. You understand? So psychology is in infancy stages compared to the psychology already delineated in Scripture. You understand? About the human condition and emotions, etc., etc. So when you look at the idea of the creation, right, in Vedic cosmology, so I only pointed out what is called sarga. Sarga means the original part of the creation, which means the genesis of all the elements necessary for creation, etc. Then there's Visarga, which is a secondary creation, right? Which then manifests the various phenomena we see. Like, in the Visarga, secondary feature of the creation, after the genesis from a supreme being, a divine order, divine intelligence, right? Then you have a secondary creation in which all of the elements are now organized and systematized in a way that they function as we are able to perceive them. You understand? Now, scientists will say, well, you're saying so no, New York City, New Jersey, and California, etc., didn't show up at that time. You understand? So we're not going to get ridiculous here. We're saying that all of the elements which produce social fabric, etc., human bodies, all of that was then done in a secondary creation. Now they actually give a number in Vedic cosmology of 8,400,000 different species, not accounting for nuances within the species, but 8,400,000 species. So now somebody can say, well, that definitely can't be, that definitely can't be. Well, you have to prove it. And then if you say, well, the onus of proof is on me, no, it's not. Because I at least have the basis of a logic that I'm following. So if we go back to the root of our logical acceptance, you telling me everything came from nothing, and then that fish became this, and then a cat became a dog, and so forth, and you haven't observed that, you can't replicate it, right, which violates all the scientific principles, but you're still forcing that that's a conclusion, and you're admittedly saying, I don't know what the genesis of all of that was, we're just saying nothing, and then it started happening. That does not follow logic in the same way of what I just explained. So if I had to put those two things on the table and say, well, you know, by logical inference, what am I going to accept? I'm not going to take the bewilderment of credentialed over and over different kinds of conjectures. Let me explain what I'm talking about, because that sounds a little jumbled. What happens is that you can get somebody in the field of biology, somebody in the field of paleontology, somebody in the field of anthropology, right, archaeology. They all do individual investigations, and then you start putting pieces together like a crossword puzzle, and then give suppositions and conjectures based on what you have been able to match up. You put two puzzle pieces together and say, oh, this means that this is the conclusion. It's confirming our conclusion. But then you turn around and say, but I don't know the essential variable, which is the genesis of it all. You're observing it, putting it together, postulating a whole theory on it, missing the original variable. That's huge. That's huge. You cannot make a calculation and not have that variable. Because if that variable is discovered, right, and no scientist is going to say we're not in the process of discovery. You can't find one that will say we're not in a further development and discovery mode. Well, if you do discover, and here's the key thing about this, then why is there an adamant refusal to investigate that idea and to immediately box it as mythology and not take a deeper investigation of it? Because then it would oblige people to maybe have to say, oh, I was wrong about all of these things. What to speak of that? But then if there's an acknowledgement of a supreme being, etc., there's other obliging realities that go along with that. Well, if there is a supreme being, what does that mean for me? And how am I related? All those questions axiomatically come up. And therefore, to avoid that, and to also allow what's called God play to happen, not acknowledging it can allow me to do that. God play, let me explain what God play is. An atheist will say, and I heard this just literally a day ago, somebody challenged them, well, you know, spiritualists will say that there was a creation related to a supreme being and so forth in the beginning. So the atheist person said, well, the scientists don't know that for sure. I don't know that. Listen to this carefully. I don't know that, and you don't know that. So now, a couple of things should be unpacked here. One is they're saying no scientist knows, because any field of science has not yet been able to confirm what is the true genesis of everything. So everybody's operating on this Darwin evolution theory, but they cannot say for sure what the genesis was. Right? Now, he says they don't know, inclusive of himself. Then he directly says, I don't know. But then you don't know either. So now God play means you've suddenly developed a quality of the very person we're talking about, which is omniscience. Because you can affirm what I know or don't know. That means you must be omniscient, because you can affirm not only me, but I would be a microcosm, I don't want to say that, but an example of millions, if not billions of people who believe in a supreme being. So you're saying that you are omniscient and you know none of these people know. That's God play. So you're declaring a quality of the very God we're talking about and not accepting him. Because you're saying, I don't know, therefore you don't know. And if you admit that you're not omniscient, then you are, I can find other choice words, right? I'll couch it nicely. Then you're espousing bovine scatology. So go and do the research on what that means, right? It's a pretty popular saying in the world, right? Because you're saying, I don't know. But then you're immediately saying, and you don't know either. What's the basis of, and you're a scientist, so what's the basis of your affirmation that I don't know? Are you conscious of my consciousness and my intelligence? Are you omniscient? Because that is a God feature. And even if you say, well, no, obviously I'm not omniscient, you just mentioned a feature of omniscience by default because of egoism or whatever it is. So you're acknowledging that there's such a thing as omniscience. And if you don't have it, and other human beings don't have it, where's omniscience coming from? So in this way, just like I put in the title, if you took a simple comparative look, right, escaping the whole couching and boxing of everything by academia, and you just laid both ideas on the table, it is obviously more logical that the explanations given, I'm speaking from Vedic context, but even if you took ontological narratives, which means the combination of an ontology, which is describing how something works, along with the narrative like Adam and Eve, etc., right? Because you can punch holes in the narrative part, but you can't really punch holes in the ontology of it. The ontology is that there was a divine being, and that the idea of a masculine and feminine polarity manifested from divinity, right, in its image. You understand? All those kind of things ontologically make sense. Whether or not the actual narrative here, there was an Adam and an Eve in the Garden of Eden, no. But that very well could be a narrative explaining an ontology. How they saw how things work, and they gave this explanation. So this is another trick of sometimes, I don't want to say academicians, because not all academicians are like that, but those who are adverse to God. They try to punch holes in the narrative without catching the ontological intent. Of course, in Vedic scriptures, it's laid out, so it's not just ontology. They're laying out, this is a historical reality that's cyclic in nature. Because another thing that is a confrontation with the whole idea of evolutionary theory is that it's linear. That we start at a certain point and we're in this constant evolution. But almost every spiritual science in antiquity says, no, everything is cyclic. So we go through cycles. You understand? We go through cycles. So things are being repeated. You understand? So it's not like we're this, like I remember I gave a lecture at Howard University, this is years ago, and I mentioned that there's a sort of cave to the microwave idea that's held among academicians and scientists and sociologists, other kinds of persons also, depending on who it is. Doesn't matter the science, it just matters their worldview. That we're somehow evolving from some caveman experience all the way up to the I said cave to the microwave, because back at the time I was speaking, right? And I'm not speaking of the merits of microwaves or not here, so I don't want to get into that discussion. But I'm just saying that this idea of linear progress in intellectual thought and everything else. But then when you go back and challenge, well, if we've evolved intellectually, scientifically, etc., to a higher stage, why could we not replicate the pyramids? I was able to visit the pyramids at Giza. So it's not just the external mathematical and engineering marvel, but if you go inside, you'll see written in metanetia or hieroglyphics the actual philosophical content and cosmological content for which the pyramid was used. So there was some synthesis of divine science and natural science. But at some point, wherever that divergence came between the two, now you have people saying idiotic things like, yes, I don't know, but I can come to a conclusion about what everything is, but I don't know what the genesis of it is. So I can assure you this mathematical equation ends in 10, even though I don't know how the equation begins and what the numbers are that will produce my end result. That's just not logical. And whether or not you build assumptive things one on top of the other, until you solve the original variable, you can never be conclusive about the answer. You understand? And I would just challenge, now of course, you get people, if I say that, who will come on and they'll spew an entire bug spray, so to speak, of jargon, right? And they'll try to mask what's unknown. Or another thing is to immediately be sarcastic from an intellectual posture of superiority and say something like, well, I don't believe necessarily there was a God in the beginning, but I also don't believe in unicorns. Nobody's talking about unicorns. We're not talking about unicorns. We're talking about God. So what is the inference to unicorns? Oh, just like I don't have any experience of unicorns, I don't have experience of God. So in other words, it's to try to minimize the idea of God by immediately inferring it's as imaginary as unicorns. You understand? So this is the nature of the tricks they use. But if you press them to the wood, no, give me the actual logic behind the absence of belief. Zip, nada. You understand? So I seem a little passionate about this, and that's because I think I explained on a class that I had on Sunday, and also my Monday night phone conference class, right? By the way, if you want information on either one of those classes, you could reach out to me in inbox and so forth. And if I know you and everything, we can exchange. But here the thing is, I mentioned in those classes that the effect that this is having on the periphery right now of the Vaishnav Mandal is concerning. Because you have a consistency of those who are aspiring or practicing, I don't know how to couch it, of Vaishnav Dharma, right? You have them espousing these ideas because they're unable to either, I can't understand what the phenomenon is, and probably maybe they would be able to explain it better. But in spite of the logic presented in Srimad Bhagavatam, and the absence of logic, and even the admitted absence of knowledge about the genesis of things and all of that, they're still clinging to an idea that we need to somehow synthesize science, and where science and bhakti diverge, they feel a need to align with science. I really don't understand that. But it has become more prevalent, at least right now in the periphery of the Vaishnava Mandal, but it's certainly seeping into the Vaishnava Mandal via aspiring devotees or whatever who are feeling like that, and they're kind of posturing these things through media and other ways. And when you really think about it, it does raise the question, well, what revelation has come about from your practice? Because we admit that bhakti is a revelatory process born of the combination of practice and mercy. So what in your practice has lacked that it hasn't produced the revelations which would give you the firm enough faith to even see the logic, what to speak of experience something that would then give you a good posture on what is science and what is bhakti. And again, I want to reiterate in closing that where science and bhakti are synthesized, hallelujah. Where they diverge, it's important to keep the focus that the absolute truth is in bhakti. I'm just going to put it plainly. And that's not saying to the exclusion of every other religion and so forth, because every culture of antiquity and religious tradition that's genuine, when you search out its root, you'll come to the same conclusions, right? The same revelation in its manifest form may not be there, but any deep practice of those things will lead to the same ultimate revelation. You understand? Bhaktivinoda Thakur couched this in Jaiva Dharma, that everything is really part of Vaishnava Dharma in the sense that it's part of an absolute fact about God, the soul, and relationships. You understand? So no matter what spiritual path you're walking, it will culminate at some point in that reality. What is God? Who am I? And what is the relationship? The either outright denial, the unwillingness to deal with that, or whatever it might be, that's part of a contingent or component, I don't know how large, of the academic scientific community, then certainly if you are a religionist or spiritualist or whatever, I don't see how you can align with it. Again, wherever synthesis occurs between science and God or spirituality, whatever, wherever they diverge, the absolute truth is absolute. Because right now we're operating in terms of academia and everything on a completely relative platform because of the unsolved variable. Even if things that are presented seem to present an idea of absolute truth, until you've solved that variable of consciousness, the soul, and God, right, which you're admitting you don't know. So I'm not imposing that on people. It's being admitted I don't know. That's what they're saying. Right? Until you solve that, then you have a huge unaccounted for variable that could very well change everything about what you know. Understand? All right, I think we need to conclude here. I have some other services to do. Jai Haribo Sadhana Siddha Prabhu, Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu. So, yeah, this is like, you maybe can, I don't know, I have not posted the class from Sunday, and I think I might have done one other class or something, or one other just short video on this. I'm not actually making an official presentation. Obviously, I've not put out notes and so forth and so on. Again, I'm just speaking from heart and giving just a reference that by the comparative logic or plausibility of explanations, just looking at that alone, you know, something arising from nothing versus something arising from an absolute being which has all the qualities which we do observe, including emotion, consciousness, etc. Right? All right. Haribo. Vancha kalpatarubhishcha kripa sindhuvevacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Jai Radhe Radhe.